House will be in order. All those not having privileges to the floor will please vacate the chamber. Members and guests will please rise as we are led in prayers today by Reverend Malin Dungy, who is one of our assistant doorkeepers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May God bless you, our delegates, our distinguished guests, family members, and friends. Allow us to pray. Most gracious and heavenly Father, we, your people, have gathered ourselves together today to thank you for having one more chance to praise you, to thank you for our families and friends. Father God, we thank you for loving us so much that you sent your son, Jesus, to die on the cross. Father God, I pray right now that you anoint these, your delegates, their hearts, their minds, that they continue to lean not to their own understanding, but in all their ways acknowledge you and allow you to direct the decisions that will be made this day, knowing that a house divided will never stand, that there is power in unity, Father God, because all things are possible through Christ Jesus that strengtheneth us. Father God, I ask right now that you give these delegates the wisdom, the strength, and the courage to continue to stand on the wall as watchmen to watch over the people with whom they represent in this great state of West Virginia. Father God, we're lifting up their families, Father God, to bless them. Bless Delegate Orvan's family, Father God, his father's in the hospital, and all those who have had newborn babies, Father God. We thank you for all the blessings, knowing that all good blessings come from above. And Father God, when all has been said and done, we ask that you give these, your delegates, travel mercy to take them home to their destinations and bring them back at the appointed time to praise you and do your business according to your will for your people. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
Amen. Members and guests will please remain standing as we're led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the gentleman from 53rd, Doggett Lewis.
Will the members of the House please, members and guests of the House, please stand and join me in a salute to our great flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Reading of the journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Thursday, May 18th, 2017.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 10th, Delegate Kelly.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
The gentleman from the 10th asks unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and it be approved as having been read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The journal is approved as having been read. For what purposes does the gentleman from the 25th, Delegate Painter, seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to have consent to address the House.
The gentleman from the 25th asks unanimous consent to address the House. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman may proceed.
I'd like to let everybody know we had another accident in Wyoming County at Pinnacle Mine last night. We lost a good man, and he was from Mann, West Virginia, graduated from Mann, had 3 kids, and these guys, they put it on the line every night for their families and to give us electricity, to provide for the state, for the world. They don't get much respect, and it's a thankless job, but these guys, they deserve all the respect we give them. They salt of the earth people, and all our coal miners are the same way. It's no matter how safe we make this, it's always going to be a dangerous job. And I'd just like to ask for a moment of silence for him, and God bless all of our coal miners and their families.
If all members and guests will please rise for a moment of silence. Members and guests may be seated. Introduction of guests. John from the 43rd, Delegate Eisner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Delegate Hartman and myself, seated in the West Gallery are students from Colton Elementary School, along with their teacher, Mandy Menninger. I'd ask them to stand and be recognized and that the House make them feel welcome.
Further introductions. Reports of standing committees. Reports of select committees. Messages from the executive. Messages from the Senate. Resolutions, petitions, motions, bills introduced.
House Bill 110 by Delegates Pushkin and Rowe relating to taxation.
Bill be referred to the Committee on Finance. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading. Bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 107 relating generally to the Tax Reform Act of 2017.
Are there amendments?
Delegates Robinson, Storch, Barrett, Fluharty, and Lovejoy move to amend the bill. This is HFA, Robinson, Storch, Barrett, Fluharty, and Lovejoy, 519, number 1.
Gentleman from the 36th, Delegate Robinson, asks unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from 36.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we have here is currently in the bill on our historic tax credit, we have a cap per project of $3.75 million. What the amendment tries to accomplish is taking off that cap and allowing our companies and different investors to come in, and if they want to spend money and invest in our communities of tens of millions of dollars, they can accomplish that without a cap. Right now, the historic tax credit the last few years has spent $400,000, and in this bill we're putting caps on it of $3.75 million. I hope that we have the issue where we have too much investment in our communities, but right now that's not the case. What this bill will allow is the large buildings, the 40,000 square feet buildings, these large projects that we can't seem to get people to take on, they have that opportunity and the tax credit will be there, be available for them. Right now in the budget, it does not have a great impact, and I hope you'll support the bill, and I reserve the right to close, sir. Mr. Speaker.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? Gentleman from 35th, Delegate Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and one of many amendments. So within this bill, there is a change in our current status for historical tax credits on buildings. Presently, we're an outlier. Our tax credit's at 10%. This bill takes it to 25%, which is very similar to many, many other states, if not all but 2, I believe. Currently, at 10%, we have no project cap nor annual cap, and we'll talk about the annual cap, I think, right after this. And there is no provision in current law that one has to be current on their taxes either. What's being proposed is the governor, in this bill, put in a per project cap. Well, I'm going to step back. We passed legislation dealing with historic tax credits earlier, sent it to the Senate, and that bill failed. Didn't come up over there. And what we passed through this body before, it did not have a per project cap, but it had a much lower annual cap. This bill that came from the governor has a $3.75 million project cap. What that means is a project that is $15 million would be capped out at 3.75. That's 25% of the total project cost. Charleston, Wheeling, some of our cities may have larger projects, but historically, we have not had any projects of those sizes that have come before us. And over the last 5 years, not once have we had more than $500,000 in credits used. This is new territory. We can always look at these big projects. I think the 3.75 is a prudent financial step to do. And as these projects come forward, they can be reviewed. And in fact, there is a process right now in this bill that if this passes, these credits are available for any dollar spent after July 1 of this year. But they can't be used for 2 years later on the credit. So the expenditures have to be made to the extent that there is a big project. And I'm hoping we have a bunch of big projects because this will drive that. But they can be handled as they come through, and if this cap needs to be higher because of that, we can do that. But from a prudent standpoint right now, I urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment, and the 3.75 is a good cap, and it makes sure that we don't forget about some of our smaller projects too. Because without a cap, you could have a couple big projects that would take all of our money. Anyway, I urge rejection, Mr. Speaker.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment before I recognize the gentleman from 36 to close debate? Gentleman from 36.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the chairman stated, for the last 5 years, we haven't had the problem of a $20, $30, $40 million project in our communities. What a great problem to have. How would you like $20, $30, $40 million projects to be popping up in your community? The historic tax credit is the real deal. We talk about economic development. This is a program that will drive economic development. As the chairman also said, this credit does not go into effect for 2 years. It does not affect any fiscal problems. It will not create any fiscal problems. Why put a cap on someone wanting to put $100 million into our community? If we have $100 million brought into our community, what a great problem to have. Let's vote for this, let's pass it, let's take the cap off, and let's move forward. And I request the yeas and nays, Mr. Speaker.
Roll call has been demanded. Is demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of adoption of the gentleman's amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 35 ayes, 54 nays, 11 members absent not voting. Less than the majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments?
Delegates Robinson, Storch, Barrett, Fluharty, and Lovejoy move to amend the bill. This is HFA Robinson, Storch, Barrett, Fluharty, and Lovejoy 519, number 2.
Gentleman from the 36 asked unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from 36.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, on the historic tax credit, right now we have a $20 million cap. That would be a 4 times multiplier of contributions and investment in our community. What the amendment proposes to do is to move that cap to $30 million. As with the last amendment, we still would have had an aggregate cap. What this will do is increase the aggregate cap to $30 million, and that would cap us out at $120 million investment for this tax credit to be applicable. As I said before, we don't have the problem of too many people joining in on this project. So the best thing to do is to cap it. I don't understand a reason for a cap at all, but to be fiscally responsible, I believe we could raise this to $30 million and still be fiscally responsible. And I reserve the right to close, Mr. Speaker.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? Gentleman from 35th, Doug Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment. I think I gave many reasons in the prior. We did pass earlier a $5 million cap, and I think some of the feedback that was received since regular session from those here in Charleston, Wheeling, and others, there are some projects on the board. But from a fiscal standpoint, look at where we are right now. And to have an open-ended and even a higher one of potential dollars going out of the door right now, I don't think is prudent. And to have a $20 million fiscal cap, which is 4 times the prior one, I think is a prudent point to have. And let's not remember, without a cap, was it just 3 or 4 short years ago, a bill that had language in it as it related to alternative fuels, and it cost the taxpayers of this state $100 million. Now is the time to be fiscally responsible. I believe this $20 million cap does that, and it allows for room down the road to increase that. I urge rejection, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from 3rd, Doug Fluharty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the amendment. Now, what we're doing here is simply going from 20 to 30, and 20 was a rather arbitrary number that was thrown out. So when I discovered this 20 number, I went back to my people back home, because we have many projects, as the chairman just said, that are basically on board, ready to go. We have 4 projects in Ohio County set to go if we pass this legislation the right way, totaling upwards to $44 million in investments. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money that will contribute to not just my area, but the entire Northern Panhandle, and I'm sure your areas as well want to get on board. My worry at this $20 million number is there's going to be a race to get on board, and once we do this race, this is going to fill up. It's going to be capped, it's going to be topped, and we're not going to get it done. If we take it to 30, when I was talking to the individuals that are concerned about whether this cap is feasible or not, 30 seems to be more applicable to what we're trying to do. And it's not like we're being fiscally irresponsible with this. The only money we're talking about is money coming in that's not currently coming in. The responsible thing to do is not get in the way. This is government getting in the way of projects taking place. We're taking small steps. We need to take the more responsible step and not be holding back our potential projects and the investments into our cities and communities, which will take place at a higher rate if we can go from 20 to 30. So that's the theory behind it. I think the $20 million number was arbitrary without much logic. And speaking with those that are involved with these projects, they believe $30 million cap would get us there and also be fiscally responsible along the way. Thank you.
John for the first, Doug McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman for the third yield for a question?
Gentleman yields.
I've heard or read something where Independence Hall in Wheeling is possibly being looked at by some investors to renovate.
That could be one of many. That was not on the list of the ones I just described. I know we have the Wheeling Pit building, which is a huge building that is certainly on the verge, and maybe the Chamber of Commerce president from the third may be able to speak to that better than I can. But certainly, a lot of our historic obviously these historic buildings are going to be on the list now that could be taken up.
So if that's accurate, and there are investors willing to renovate Independence Hall, where the birth of this state took place, your amendment, would that potentially help that renovation?
Absolutely. I think it would make it much more feasible. What we're doing, we're getting almost there right now with the way it is currently written, but we have a certain amount of space available. Once we hit this $20 million threshold, which could be eaten up just from one community potentially. So certainly if we are able to raise that another $10 million, it opens the door for more projects.
All right, thank you.
Other members desiring to speak before I recognize gentleman from 36, Delegate Robinson, to close debate. Gentleman from 35th, Delegate Nelson.
Just a point of maybe clarification on that. I've heard about the big project up in Wheeling. We have a potential very large one here, as well as in Huntington. The bill we just passed has a $3.75 million cap on a project, so it doesn't make 20 million, 30. It has nothing to do with affecting the projects of greater size. So again, I urge rejection.
Gentleman from 36, Delegate Robinson, to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the chairman said, we voted down the opportunity for some of those larger projects on the last amendment. I didn't think the numbers were necessary. I thought we understood that economic development was what we're here for. That's what we're trying to do. This project is the real thing. Marshall did a study. For every $1 million, we create 16 jobs. For every dollar we spend in this tax credit, $4 is back invested in the community. These projects are the real thing. What I asked was, how many historic buildings do we have in West Virginia? What I was told is there's too many to count. So there's 93 historic districts across the state. Most likely there's a historic district in your district somewhere. In that historic district, most likely you drive past a large dilapidated building that has nothing in it. This tax credit will put something there. We'll invest and encourage investors to come and put something in the building in your district. Voting for this is voting for economic development, is voting for investment in your community. So please vote for investment in your community, for the economic development of West Virginia, and I request the yeas and nays.
Roll call has been demanded. Is demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of the gentleman's amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 37 ayes, 52 nays, 11 members absent not voting. Less than a majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments?
Delegate Painter moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Painter 519, number 1.
John, for the 25th, Delegate Painter asks unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. John from the 25th.
No long drawn-out explanation here. It is what it is. It's striking the code to raise the telecommunications tax. And Some will say you can't cut your way to prosperity, but you sure can't tax your way to it either. So I'm not going to reserve the right to close or anything, but I would ask for yeas and nays.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? Gentleman from 35th, Delegate Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment. I will chat later about the broadening, if you will, or the exemption of certain loopholes. This telecommunication tax is subjecting the mobile phones to consumer sales tax. 44 other states do the same thing. If this happens to fail or be passed, the bodies could be looking at some other revenue sources or some really, really deep cuts to higher ed, DHHR, some other programs. I urge rejection.
Other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, the question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. Roll call has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of the gentleman's amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 15 ayes, 74 nays, 11 members absent, not voting. Less than the majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments?
Delegate Painter moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Painter 519, number 2.
Gentleman from 25th, ask unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from 25th.
This one's a little, this one should be a little easier to swallow. This is just raising the the exemption from $2,500 to $2,750. I figure we can give, as much as we're looking to raise taxes on them, we can give our taxpayers a little bit of help. And again, I don't want to close, but I would ask for the yeas and nays.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? Gentleman from the 35th, Delegate Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My good friend, ultimately, I think we hope to be here. Within this bill, for the first time since 1987, we're increasing the personal exemption that a tax-paying citizen can use in this state. Our personal exemption has been at $2,000 for the last 30 years, unchanged. What's in this bill is raising that by $500, $2,500 per person, for those earning or have adjusted gross income under $100,000. The total cost of doing that will be $30 million a year. With the gentleman's amendment, that would increase that cost up to $45 million a year. Right now in our fiscal situation, it's not a prudent time to do that, but ultimately I would hope that we would be able to do more with our personal exemptions, and especially for our lower income individuals that are hurting right now. I urge rejection.
Gentleman from the 1st, Delegate McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the gentleman's amendment. With all due respect, it's always the right time to give back private property to its rightful owners. This is not our money. Let's just make that clear. It's not our money. It's not our cost. We've extracted this money from individuals that rightfully own it to begin with. So anytime we have an opportunity to give tax relief back, we have to take it. So with all due respect, I would just like to see some members here refrain from the demagoguery and the incorrect analysis when it comes to life and private property.
Further members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? Roll call has been demanded. Is demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of the gentleman's amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 30 ayes, 59 nays, no members absent, not voting. Less than a majority of members present having voted the affirmative, I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments?
Delegate Kessinger moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Kessinger 519.
Lady from 32nd, Delegate Kessinger asks unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Lady from 32nd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry I'm losing my voice, so I hope everybody can understand me. I know we all start our amendments by saying this is a simple amendment, but it really is. I am just simply changing the effective date for the contracting portion of this bill from 2017 to 2018. It hasn't been a month since I've been receiving calls from people from my district who are still trying to rebuild from last year's flood, and I want to make sure that we are not going to be balancing the budget by taxing them more on their rebuilding. I'm sorry, my throat is messed up. I'm concerned any bill that we pass in this body can have unintended consequences, and I'm concerned that this bill may have some that may directly impact the people who are still struggling after last year's flood. I feel like we've been rushing. I know we're pressed for time and we have a lot of time constraints, but since day one, we've really been rushing to pass this revenue bill, and I really think we should sit down and think about the unintended consequences that could potentially come with this bill, and this is an amendment that I think would protect any individual that could potentially be harmed by the increased sales tax on something that is currently exempted. So I would reserve the right to close, Mr. Speaker.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? John from 35th, Delegate Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and a good friend, we all are very concerned about those that have experienced unfortunate things. There is another amendment behind this, and maybe it's a shame that the following amendment that the sponsor here is also on, you know what, I'll speak to both of them. I'm going to urge rejection of this amendment, but I'll be just the opposite on the next. The next specifically deals with those counties affected by the flood under the executive order. But let's step back a little bit. So within this bill, it is adding the construction cost for labor only. In House Finance, initially, the bill included, the committee sub included a 6% sales tax on the first $40,000 of new construction cost. In House Finance, we amended out any materials to avoid a potential double taxation. We only have a 6% consumer sales tax on the labor for the first $40,000. The gentlelady's amendment would move that back a year. The effect on the 18 budget would be $26 million. The amendment that follows, again, will limit that exemption, no consumer sales tax on the labor of new construction for the first 40,000 in those affected counties. I've been informed also that, I guess under Title 110, if I'm saying this right, it provides for the governor to issue an executive order finding that a flood has occurred and exempting related construction purchases for consumer sales tax. All purchases. So what I would also recommend that we do is recommend that the House adopt a resolution asking the governor to issue such an executive order, and that we to deal with this very situation of those 4 counties. I urge rejection of this amendment, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be just the opposite on the next.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment before I recognize the lady from 32nd to close? Gentleman from the 1st, Delegate McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand in support of this amendment. I don't know why it was determined to tax the first $40,000 on labor, because what you're really doing is hurting the small guys, the small contractors, the worst. The burden's going to fall on them. And if any of you guys know small contractors, small little business owners that own these little contracting crews, the government has so many regulations already that are such a burden on these folks that I just can't believe that we're going to slam them again with another tax. And it's not removing loopholes, it's not removing exemptions, that's just more demagoguery. All we're doing is extracting more of their property from hardworking folks. And we all have these guys throughout every one of our districts. They build little projects, they improve homes, they renovate. Yeah, and they do renovate a lot of the flood victims' homes. So we're going to sit here and slam them with more taxation? I support the gentlelady's amendment. And I hope that we get a little bit more in here to vote green on this one. And ayes and nays.
Lady from the 32nd to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to stand here and pretend like anybody in this body is against the flood victims. I know that all 100 members would give the shirt off their back to anybody who is still struggling after the flood that was less than a year ago. The chairman mentioned that I have another amendment with my friend from Greenbrier County coming up after this one. And the reason why I'm introducing this one is because I'm concerned about the practicality of the next one. There are a lot of people who were affected by the flood who didn't know they had to file with FEMA. They had no idea. They live in the haulers way back where nobody came to see them or even knew they were impacted. And so they are going, how are they going to prove that they were impacted by the flood within rebuilding their home? And if it covers the entire county, will there still be individuals who weren't necessarily impacted by the flood who would be getting this exemption? So that's my concern with the second one. I will still support it because I would rather have some protection than none. But my first priority is for every individual. There's probably not a lot of people still rebuilding, but there are some. And I really genuinely feel that that's our job. This is our job as legislators, is to make sure that our communities are well taken care of and are prepared. And I don't feel like this bill does that within its current form. I want to share a little story. I think I may have shared it with some of you before, but last year during the flood, I was in Rainelle. I was helping in Greenbrier County. It was getting ready to rain, and there were all of these things that had been donated from both panhandles and central West Virginia and all over the country for the people who were struggling. And there were mountains and mountains of bottled water and jugs of water. And I had been there for hours. I was tired. I was muddy. I probably smelled bad. And I had been working alongside this woman who was very friendly, was very kind. We exchanged smiles. We talked a little bit. And she just kept working. She was just working so hard. And I was starting to get tired, wanted to go home. But after it had gotten dark, a gentleman came up to her. And he said, "I heard you don't have a place to sleep tonight." And it hit me that this woman had literally lost everything she owned in that flood. And she was still out there helping her neighbors. And I don't think it's too much to ask. I know a lot of us feel like we need revenue to balance this budget. Some of us feel like we need cuts. But I don't think it's too much to ask that we find another avenue to either bring in the revenue or make the cuts. It's 1 year. I'm asking for 1 year, July 1, 2018. So, Mr. Speaker, I would encourage everyone to vote for this amendment, and I appreciate your time.
Roll call's been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of the lady's amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 33 ayes, 56 nays, 11 members absent not voting, less than a majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments?
Delegates Nelson and Fritsch move to amend the bill. This is HFA Nelson and Fritsch 519, number 1.
Gentleman for what purpose does the gentleman from 13th seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask with unanimous consent to return to the second order of business for the purpose of an introduction.
Okay. If you just wait till we'll finish this amendment, then we'll do that.
Yes, sir.
It's immediately after. Gentleman from 35th, Delegate Nelson, asked now to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman
Yes,
from 35th.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. We had a rather long committee meeting yesterday, and one of our co-chairs, or I should say both of our chairs, had a question as it related to the rule-making capability that was left out of this bill. So what this amendment does is provides emergency rulemaking to our tax commissioner immediately. I urge adoption of the amendment.
With other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, the question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the amendment adopted. The gentleman from the 13th asked unanimous consent to return to the second order of business. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from 13th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Up in the balcony, we have several classes from Polka Elementary School. And on behalf of the Putnam County delegation and Delegate Brewer and I'd like for them to stand, including my niece, Hannah Higginbotham. So if you all wouldn't mind standing. She says she's the next Shelley Moore Capito, so if she would mind waving, please. And we want to welcome them.
Further introductions? Further amendments?
Delegates Butler and Summers move to amend the bill. This is HFA Butler and Summers 519, number 1.
The gentleman from the 14th asked now consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Trying to figure out which one this is. Yep. Okay. Yes, this is the one dealing with Social Security. The legislation before us allows for our senior citizens to get a tax break on their Social Security income. And the way this currently is structured, it's tiered up in steps, and it starts out at a 25% reduction, and it takes 4 years until the senior citizens get full relief from paying tax on their Social Security benefits. What this amendment does is it does away with the step-up process, and it gives them relief immediately in the 2018 year. And I reserve the right to close and ask for yeas and nays.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? Gentleman from the 35th, Delegate Nelson.
What is in the bill, as a matter of fact, was amended in House Finance to speed it up. We will have full elimination of the taxation of Social Security benefits in 3 years. For those under an adjusted gross income of $100,000. Our bill steps this in over 3 years, such that in the first year, starting fiscal year or 1/1/18, 25% of any Social Security benefit that one's receiving will be exempt from West Virginia taxes. Second year, an additional 25% will be exempt. And what was amended in the House Finance, because this was initially could be over 4 years, that third year, all Social Security for those have adjusted gross income under $100,000 will not have a tax on their Social Security benefits. What the gentleman's amendment does, basically this is going to cost $66 million when fully implemented. That would move an immediate tax reduction of $66 million into the current year and cause an even greater hole that we're going to have to find another funding source for to make it up. Or, again, have to maybe cut something. I think the most prudent thing, given our current financial situation and given true relief for those that have worked many years, is to step that in over 3 years. Mr. Speaker, I urge rejection.
With other members desiring to speak to the adoption amendment before I recognize the gentleman from the 14th. Gentleman from the 10th, Delegate Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask unanimous consent for Rule 49. I am a recipient of Social Security benefits, as is my wife.
To the gentleman, to the extent it would have an impact on you, it would be as a member of a class. What I would do is just ask if you wish to make that same request based on either yourself or a family member, we will, if you push your button now, and we will record that. You'll just push your recognition button if you wish to make a request pursuant to Rule 49 because of an impact it may have on you or a family member. We still have some changing buttons here, so I'm going to ask, keep your recognition button pressed if you still have it pressed. If anyone is wishing to additionally press their button, please do so now. We're going to record it. All right, you may turn your recognition buttons off now. To each member who pressed their recognition button, again, you would be as a member of a class that would be affected to the extent you would be affected by this legislation. And I would go ahead and extend that ruling to ruling on the actual passage of the bill so that we don't have to do this as well. To the extent that would have an impact on you as to this amendment and passage of the bill, you would be as a member of a class and be directed to vote. For person, gentleman to 12th, Doug at Westfall, seek recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the previous ruling, you also, family members, brothers, sisters, or anybody in this?
I was actually more referring to to immediate family members, a spouse or a child. But
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To the extent that anyone would be concerned about a ruling as to a sibling or other family member, it would extend as well. I think that would be even less direct in terms of impact on you, but to immediate family members in particular, you would be affected as a member of a class and therefore be directed to vote. Other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 58th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I will add just a couple comments. The long-sought policy change that we have before us of reducing the tax on Social Security income, long sought by some of my colleagues who have been around here for a long time, that we passed out of the Finance Committee in somewhat of a celebrated bipartisan effort, is a responsible 3-year phase-in. That, I think, might be in jeopardy if we add this in a $66 million one-time cliff, try to force that into this bill. You have to remember this isn't in a vacuum and this isn't the final step. We are still dealing with a budget gap, a less than cooperative Senate, some major cuts that still face us even if this bill passes. This policy change is an outstanding policy change. I think we have a great opportunity, a great chance to keep it in there. It is important to keep the 3-year phase in because I think that gives us momentum and hope that it'll stay. To make the change and make it a 1-year, $66 million cliff, I think threatens its actual chances to make it to the finish line, and I would urge rejection. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John from the 60th, Doug Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If I may, I'd like to read a note from my friend Pastor Aaron Melhorn. He said, I'm 100% against any tax on Social Security. I'm on Social Security SSD. No, I didn't go before a judge to get it. This is money I'm receiving from taxes I've paid in the past. This is my money. I'm to a point now where I'm spending approximately $200 a month just going to the doctor. My co-pays, medicine, it's well over $400 a month on the $1,197 that I receive each month from SSD. If I have to make that stretch and live within my means, so should the state. We have a choice here between making life hard on ourselves, on the state, and making life hard on the people who are trying to live in this state. That is our option. It's really that stark. It's really that black and white. Are we going to make the state live within its means, or are we going to ask Pastor Melhorn, with his $1,197 that he's receiving from money he already put in? In other words, we're double taxing it. Are we going to ask him to suck it up? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John for the 55th, Douglas Spinago.
I'm going to join my good friend, the majority leader, in saying we need to reject this amendment. This is a bipartisan bill, and frankly, this is a crucial piece, at least on this side of the aisle, of getting rid of Social Security being taxed under the $100,000. But we'd love to have it done immediately. But this bill before us only brings in $100 million. We're still way short, at least of what we believe, what you're going to have to get here. If you're going to throw 66% of the revenue measure out the window, I don't really need to even vote for the bill. But this is a long-term fix. This is crucial to any deal getting done. If there's going to be personal income tax reform in this state, we are going to eliminate Social Security being taxed. But we're also being reasonable, knowing that we face huge budget deficits right now that has to be phased in. So I support the majority leader. It was an effort upstairs in finance, and this should be rejected. This is part of the deal. We'd like to get rid of it right now, but we can't. But it's part of a bigger scheme and plan. Hopefully we can get everybody out of here in a bipartisan manner. Thank you.
John for the first, Doug McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the gentleman's amendment. You know, several of us have introduced legislation to eliminate the income tax on Social Security benefits here in West Virginia for several years now. From my perspective, though, this 3-year phase-out, how am I supposed to take the word of some of these gentlemen that are promising this future phase-out by the letter of this bill? Because some of these people have also stated in the past that we were going to live within our means not too long ago. We were going to hold the line on increased taxation. So now you're asking some of us to now take your word and say, believe me, we're going to phase this out over the next 3 years, and it's going to go into effect, et cetera, et cetera. So I support the gentleman's amendment. I believe we need to give our seniors an immediate break right at the current time. Thank you.
Lady from the 16th, Doug Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am absolutely thrilled, after all the years that we've been here, that we are finally able to take some taxes off of our people's Social Security. We have struggled in the Finance Committee to come up with the best way that we can to solve our revenue issues. If anyone would understand us phasing in, taking off the Social Security, it would be our seniors, those people that were raised during the Depression, raised during the wars. They understand what it is to be frugal and to be fiscally responsible. This amendment is not appropriate at this time, and I think our seniors are going to be thrilled with what we're trying to do.
John from the 17th, Doug at Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Finance Chair yield for a short question?
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we, previous legislatures, voted to start to eliminate the tax on food. Was that done all at once or incrementally?
That predates me, but it was done incrementally.
It's somewhat like what we're proposing here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John from 25th, Doug Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to rise in support of the gentleman's amendment. And as the gentlelady from the 16th said, our seniors are our most frugal, they're our most responsible, but you can only make do with what you've got. You can't get blood from a turnip. And with all these extra taxes and we're looking at, who's it going to hit the hardest? Our seniors. They're having the hardest time already, and any way we can help them, we need to help them. Thank you.
John from the 60th, Doug Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the gentlelady from 16th said, our older friends know how to be frugal. They know how to be fiscally responsible. And the basis of frugality, the basis of fiscal responsibility is to not spend money you don't have. We need to stop spending money we don't have so we can stop taking money from people who don't have it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The other members desiring to speak for, I recognize the gentleman from the 14th to close. Gentleman from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask members of this body, what is the purpose of this provision in this bill? Remember, this is not a budget bill. This is a taxation bill. It could be a tax increase bill or it could be a tax cut bill. So the purpose of this provision, is this actually to give tax relief to senior citizens? Or is this to entice members to vote for big tax increases so that they can say they voted for senior citizens in some small way? The way this tax bill is laid out, we're giving less than $7 million of tax relief to senior citizens in the first year. And again, we're making a promise, and maybe we'll keep this promise, that in 4 years they will get the full 100% relief from the tax burden that they pay on their Social Security. So what I'm saying here is, if our real purpose here of putting this provision in the bill is to give tax relief to senior citizens, let's do it. Let's do it now. Let's not have them waiting. Let's not tell Grandma, hang on a little while longer, we're going to get relief to you. We have the opportunity to give tax relief now. Again, this is not the budget. We still have a lot of work to do on that. But if the purpose of this is to give tax relief, then let's do it. And I urge passage of the amendment, please.
I believe the gentleman asked for a roll call previously, I believe. Is that correct? Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of the gentleman's amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 20 ayes, 69 nays, 11 members absent, not voting. Less than the majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments?
Delegates Butler and Summers move to amend the bill. This is HFA Butler and Summers 519, number 2.
The gentleman from the 14th asked unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment simply takes money that this tax bill is contemplating taking money from the road fund and putting it into general revenue fund. And what this amendment would do, it would prevent us from doing that. It would keep almost $12 million in the road fund. And I ask to close and ask for the yeas and nays.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? Gentleman from 35th, Doug Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand and urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment. We've had certain funds transferred from general revenue over the years, and this particular year it's $11.7 million, and these are consumer sales taxes on various purchases of construction and maintenance equipment. What this is doing is eliminating that annual transfer of general revenue to the state road fund. One reason for this elimination, and we've spent 3 days in finance having heavy debate, discussions, questions on 2 road bills. And we're going to have 2 nice products because of all that debate. But there is a significant amount of new road money that will be coming forward from sources that are currently in place that fund our state roads and the maintenance. We all desperately want and deserve our roads replaced. But this vehicle right now of eliminating that transfer, leaving it in general revenue, so that we don't have to increase others' taxes a little bit more to fund some of our resources. I just urge rejection. We just need to keep this in general revenue right now. Thank you.
John from 34, Doggett Boggs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to reject the amendment. I don't think there's been, I know everyone has been very vocal in here about the need for increased money in our highways, especially on our non-federal highways, our secondary roads. But I believe that this only represents, with 10 highways districts, we're talking, and then 55 counties, 11, every dollar counts, don't get me wrong, but it's precious little. We've got to have a larger funding package if we're really going to be serious about taking care of our roads, and I believe this money is best served to remain in general revenue at this time, so I would urge rejection of the amendment.
Other members desiring to speak for recognized gentleman from the 14. Gentleman from the 58, Doug Coles. There we go.
There it goes. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to make sure everyone understands. I think my friend from the 14th might be a little mistaken. The $11.7 million is not in highways that we're shifting to general revenue. Maybe he misspoke, but that's not the case. It is general revenue money in general revenue that we're not going to shift to highways. Maybe a slight distinction, but general revenue is where our shortfall is, and we're asking to keep the money, the general revenue money, in general revenue. There is obviously a lot of road money under consideration, road funding, road bonds, Garvey bonds, a lot of other things we've already done, and other programs under consideration that will help address our roads. This is about keeping general revenue money to help fill the shortfall for general revenue. Additionally, I would add, we had a light winter this year, and the road fund is probably in better shape because of that light winter anyway, which, for the grace of God, gives us the ability to keep a little extra money in general revenue this year. I think it's a prudent thing to do, and therefore I oppose the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John from the 14th, to close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand corrected on where the money is and where it's going, and also would acknowledge that this is just a drop in the bucket, but I remind members that every bucket is made up of a bunch of drops. And we hear this over and over when we're talking about making reductions and things. That's just a small amount. We shouldn't worry about that. This is a small amount that would maybe fill some potholes in our neighborhoods. We're faced with tough decisions on what to do with road construction moving forward. Again, looking at fuel taxes and DMV fees and toll roads and everything else, I think this could go a long ways to help our roads, at least for some of us. So I urge passage of the amendment.
Roll call has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of the gentleman's amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 16 ayes, 74 nays, 10 members absent, not voting. Less than the majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments?
Delegates Byrd and Williams move to amend the bill. This is HFA Byrd and Williams 519, number 1.
Gentleman from 35th, Delegate Byrd, asks unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from 35th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Simple amendment. I don't care. First off, I want to say I don't care who, what, when, where, why, or how this even got in this exemption, broadening the base bill. I don't care about that. But the fact is, I can't see us as a body, when we're one of the most unhealthy states in the country, taxing people for going to work out. I mean, we should be giving tax exemptions for people to go work out. I mean, it just seems absurd to me, so I'd ask for adoption of my amendment, plain and simple. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment. Gentleman from 20th, Delegate Markham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask Rule 49 as the owner of a boxing gym where this could possibly save me some tax dollars if the amendment's passed.
To the gentleman, to the extent it may have a direct impact on you, but to the extent it would be as a member of a class, and therefore the gentleman would be directed to vote. Gentleman from the 35th, Delegate Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to once again stand and urge rejection. In every proposal that has come from the governor, the Senate, this one particular line item has been in that. And in fact, now we don't want to necessarily put an additional burden on anybody, but we're one of the few states that does exempt a consumer sales tax on health and fitness services. Mr. Speaker, I urge rejection.
Other members desiring to speak to the adoption amendment before I recognize the gentleman from 35th. Gentleman wish to close. Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Those appear to have it. Those do have it. Declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments?
Delegates Kessinger and Baldwin move to amend the bill. This is HFA Kessinger and Baldwin 519, number 2.
Lady from 32nd, or okay. Gentleman from the 42nd, Delegate Baldwin, asks unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a very complicated, very nuanced, very controversial amendment to offer today. It's actually very simple. It follows along with what my colleague from Fayette County offered before. I applaud her intent, and we had some divergent ideas about how to do that, so we decided to give them both a shot. The idea here is very simple. You exclude folks who are rebuilding from natural disasters from paying sales tax on construction labor. And I would reserve the right to close if necessary. Thank you.
The other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment. Lady from the 32nd, Delegate Kessinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to speak in favor of this amendment. While I'm disappointed the first one didn't pass, at least this provides some sort of protection for members who may, or for individuals who may have been impacted by the flood. So I would support passage.
Is there further discussion? The gentleman from the 40th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 49, I would ask if I should be excused from voting on this amendment. My home was flooded as part of the flood last year, and still working on getting it back together, and there's still construction that will take place in the future, so I would ask whether I should be excused from voting on the amendment.
Could the gentleman come to the podium for a minute? It is the ruling of the chair that the gentleman is a member of a class and would be required to vote for this as well as on the final passage of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand or rise to ask for adoption of this amendment. Obviously, this provides full relief to those that have suffered, and is a prudent thing, and welcome the amendment from the gentlelady and gentleman.
John for the 12th, Doug at Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question the amendment about the flood of 2016. What about future floods, future derechos, future? This is anything from this point on, plus the June floods?
Are you asking the sponsored
Yes.
yield? Gentleman from the 42nd or
Yes.
lady from 32nd? Gentleman for the 42nd yield? Gentleman yields.
Yes, sir. It's my understanding that yes, anytime there is a disaster, natural disaster declared by the federal government or the state government, that this would apply. So this is not just about the 2016 floods. This is moving forward as well.
Okay. So not just a storm that goes through, which happens a lot, but it's got to be a natural disaster declared by the state or federal government.
Correct. I'm looking for Brian. He must have gone out to lunch. But yes, that's my understanding. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John for 35th, Doug Nelson.
Just as a point of clarification, the gentleman was right, and also an executive order is required by the governor.
Further members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? Does either of the sponsors wish to close debate on the amendment? Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor of adoption will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? You say no. If not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Gentleman from the 58th.
Mr. Speaker, I move the constitutional rule requiring the bill to be read on 3 several days be dispensed with, and the bill will be read a third time and put upon its passage.
Gentleman 58 moves that the constitutional rule requiring a bill be read on 3 several days be dispensed with, the bill be read a third time and put upon its passage. All those in favor of the gentleman's motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 90 ayes, 0 nays, 10 members absent not voting, 4/5 of the members present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the constitutional rule suspended. Clerk, please read the bill a third time.
Committee substitute for House Bill 107, relating generally to the Tax Reform Act of 2017.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from 35th, Delegate Nelson, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I've explained most of it, but we'll just, let me step back and at least talk about the original bill, and then I'll talk about the final component that we have. So the original bill that came over from the governor, it raised the consumer sales tax from 6 to 6.85%. The original bill eliminated exemptions on telecommunications, direct use of communications, direct use of transportation, digital goods, electronic data processing, health and fitness services, and primary opinion research. It also added some language clarifying that professional employer organizations are exempt from consumer sales tax. It eliminated the transfer of the general revenue to the road fund. The bill substituted a graduated rate schedule for coal severance. The bill had a change in our personal income tax. Our current personal rates, there's 5 different categories. The bill that came over reduced that to 4 and had a 15% personal income tax reduction in 18, followed by a 5% reduction in 19. The bill exempted all military retirement income from personal income tax. And the bill extended the tax credit on historic rehabilitation structures from 10 to 25% and implemented a per project cap of 3.75. So the bill that you have in front of you, the committee substitute, together with amendments that came out of House Finance yesterday. Consumer sales tax is maintained at 6%, no increase. It eliminates any change to our current 5% severance tax on coal. It eliminated exemptions or closed loopholes on telecommunications. Again, there's 44 other states that do that right now. Electronic data services remain in the bill as being subject to consumer sales tax. Health and fitness memberships, primary opinion research. The direct use of communications remains subject to consumer sales tax. However, the Finance Committee did amend that this will not have any effect on the installation of broadband. Broadband installation is exempt from consumer sales tax. We did in finance took out the consumer sales tax on transportation. There was a lot of concern of how many industries that would affect, especially our coal industry. And then I mentioned before about contract labor on the first 40,000. We did exempt out any material. Also, the committee eliminated any potential consumer sales tax on digital goods. We heard that that could affect our higher educational institutions as well as hospitals. It does include the keeping the $11 million in general revenue that was previously transferred to our road fund. On the personal income tax side, there is no reduction in the rates. The current rates all stay the same, but three things we did that will affect personal income tax. All military income, retirement income, beginning 1/1/18 is not subject to West Virginia personal income tax. Beginning 1/1/18, we had a lengthy discussion here on Social Security. Social Security benefits will only be taxed at 75% in 18, going down to 50% in 19, and eliminated in 2020. Mentioned about the personal exemptions. For the first time since '87, we will have an increase in personal exemptions from 2,000 to 2,500. And again, both the Social Security reduction as well as the personal exemption are only on those individuals or tax-paying West Virginians that have adjusted gross income under $100,000. That's roughly 7/8 of all citizens paying taxes. Lastly, on the historic tax credit, we're falling in line with the other states. We're going from 10 to 25% for expenditures after 1/1/17, and those expenditures, at least subject, will be able to be used for their tax returns beginning in 1/1/19. It has a $3.75 million cap per project, which that could be a project of $15 million. And it implements a $20 million annual cap. And lastly, all taxpayers subject to that credit must be current in their taxes. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of the bill.
With other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill, the gentleman from the 60th, Delegate Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Request a ruling under Rule 49. Judgment under Rule 49, I hope within the next couple of years to be a military retiree, and expect my wife to be one as well. Thank you, sir.
To the extent it would have an impact on you, it would be as a member of a class, and therefore you'd be directed to vote. Gentleman from 34th, Delegate Boggs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I certainly rise in support of the bill that we have before us. Is it a perfect bill? No, which is probably provides a good bill. It's not perfect because there's a little bit in it for everybody, but I think there's a lot of good things in this. Does it have all the revenue that we're probably going to need? No, I don't think it does. But it's a work in progress, and it's a way to break the logjam and to get things moving, which is what I believe the citizens of our state want and expect. The components, and I want to say this because this is one of the truly, I believe, bipartisan efforts. And we talk a lot sometimes about bipartisan votes when bills come out of committee, but there's a big difference between having a bipartisan vote and bipartisan work on a bill. And I can truly say that this is a bill, Mr. Speaker, and to my friend the finance chairman, this is one that we've truly had bipartisan work on. Both sides have had input into, the minority has had input into, and I have to say, having sat in the gentleman from the 58th seat and the gentleman from the 35th seat before, I say that in a way that I believe reflects on both parties. It's very easy to be in the majority and not listen to the minority, but still want their vote. And I think this is a good opportunity to show what we can do when we can work together and not just worry about what the final vote will be, but truly having input into the final work product. So I would urge passage.
Gentleman from the 28th, Doug Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also ask the ruling under Rule 49. I have been a retiree for the last 38 or 9 years from the military. Thank you.
To the gentleman, to the extent it would have an impact on you, it would be as a member of a class. Therefore, the gentleman would be directed to vote. What I would do at this point as well, if everyone could turn off their lights for just a moment, in terms of recognition, just turn off your lights. And I'm going to go ahead and do what we did a moment ago on Social Security. If you have a military pension, so we've already acted on the Social Security pensions. If you have a military pension and would like to ask for a request pursuant to Rule 49, whether you should be directed to vote, if you would go ahead and push your recognition button at this point, and we will record that as anyone who has a military pension, or I would say a spouse that has a military pension, that you would press your recognition button at this time. Okay, to those who have pressed their button, the extent it would have an impact on you, there are more than 5, even within our own house, that would be affected, and therefore you'd be as a member of a class, and therefore be directed to vote. Now, if you'll all turn your recognition buttons off now, and I'm going to assume that anyone who has a button recognized now wishes to speak to the adoption of the passage of the bill. Gentleman for the first, Doug McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I oppose the bill. You know, this simply just represents a $100 million tax increase. So here we are again, second year in a row. Republicans control this House. And we're about to pass another massive tax increase. You know, 20 years ago, we had far more residents in this state, but yet far less government spending. Fast forward 2 decades, we have far fewer residents, yet far greater government spending. So just from an objective standpoint, today we have less people to govern, yet a far larger government. Take away the economics and the philosophy, and just from an objective standpoint, we are the only state in the union at the present time that continues to lose population. We're shedding population. So we're going to pass this large tax increase. And I'll just note, you know, there's a difference between bipartisanship, a bipartisan coalition that coalesces around a common principle that they share mutually, and bipartisanship bills that each side just loads up with their own favorite special interest groups to cater to. I think there's a massive philosophical difference in that point. There's been some concepts of the former that I explained that have taken place in the past, but I think this one represents the latter. So I would ask to reject, yet again, another massive tax bill that's going to fall square on the working men and women of my district.
Gentleman from the 55th, Doug Espinogo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I likewise rise in support of this bill. I fully understand that it's not nearly enough money to make things work in the budget, or at least the way we believe that to be, with massive cuts to higher education, rating the rainy day fund, DHHR cuts. This will bring in approximately $100 million. But what it does do, in my estimation, is there are 13 states that tax Social Security. 13 states. We're one of them. None of our surrounding states tax it, and we're an outlier. I've sponsored bills down here since I've been here to eliminate it. Former Chairman Harry Keith White and I offered one. We never could get any traction. But since the Senate has continued to push and push for tax reform, then let's have tax reform. But instead of the Senate's plan of giving millionaires and billionaires thousands of dollars back every year in their pocket, we're going to take care of people that make less than $100,000 in West Virginia. The people that are struggling. West Virginia's, we're the second oldest state, only behind Florida. We're dead last in per capita income. We're 49th in median household income. And this House plan, and I say it, this House body against the Senate is looking after the overwhelming majority of the people of the state of West Virginia. Not the wealthy, not the well-to-do, which seems like the only concern that they have over there. I'm proud of this body coming together in a bipartisan fashion to say if we're going to have tax returns or tax reform, we're going to raise the exemption for people making less under $100,000 a year. That's $500 back in their pocket. That's $1,000 for a household couple. You got Social Security under $100,000, you're on fixed income, we're going to take care of that. Those are good things. Taking care of our military pensions. Not giving thousands of dollars back to the very wealthiest people in the state of West Virginia and calling that tax reform while driving up the taxes on everybody else in the middle class and lower body. This body has put its foot down and said, if there's going to be tax reform, this is the type we're going to do. Make no mistake, this is a tax bill. We're raising taxes to the tune almost of $100 million, mostly by removing the exemption. I believe we're going to have to do a couple other things to get the money up there, but it's a start. Nobody wants to raise taxes, but we also don't want to go home and say, well, we cut higher education, we gutted DHHR, and we're having to continue to jump into our rainy day bond money and have our bond ratings drop. We got to make things work. So we can do both. We can chew gum and walk at the same time. And if we're going to do tax reform, we're going to have to raise revenues elsewhere. But we're also going to make sure that if we're going to do tax reform, we're taking care of the people that need it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John for the 58, Doug Coles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I would like to share that I think today is a good day. Probably thanks to you, Mr. Speaker, for your strong and steady leadership. I know it's not easy. A broad range of opinions and ideas and egos and everything to balance in this chamber. It's probably the way it's meant to be. It's probably the way it's desired. But, Mr. Speaker, I think this is a fair and reasonable approach forward. Thank you for your leadership. The chairman, my colleagues, my friends across the aisle. This is progress. This is momentum. It is a simplified approach to solve our problem. It eliminates exemptions, carve-outs, or loopholes, but it keeps the rate at 6%. It lowers Social Security income tax. It lowers military pension tax and provides the $500 personal exemption. Three major policy changes that I think are overwhelmingly supported by this chamber. It has been bipartisan work. It does provide $100 million in revenue for a budget crisis that we're about to try to tackle. And it is my great hope that that will help shield some drastic cuts that I would believe would be in that. It did have overwhelming support in the Finance Committee. I will remind my conservative friends that a structurally balanced budget is a conservative principle. Keep spending as low as we can and raise only the money we have to, but we need to balance the budget. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that this bill is not perfect, but it is a reasonable approach forward, and I think it is the clear will of the House that this bill pass over to the Senate. Thank you.
John for the 60th, Doug Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill. The fact is simple that we stood up in front of the people of this state and we said we will live within our means. At my home, we have a budget. We have a certain amount of money that comes in every month. We live within our means. We spend the money we have. I don't have the right to go next door to my neighbor's house, put a gun to his head, and say, give me some of your money. And please understand that when the government asks you for some more money, they're doing it with the full force of the government. Refuse to pay your taxes, see what happens. Well, you get fines. Refuse to pay your fines, see what happens. They put you in jail. Refuse to go to jail, what do? Sooner or later, somebody pulls a gun on you. That's what we're talking about here. I don't have the right, while I'm living within my means in my home, to go next door to my neighbor's house, put a gun to his head, and demand more money so I can meet the requirements of my budget. What do? I lower my expenditures. It's that simple. We have a certain amount of money, $4.055 billion. That's all we're allowed to spend. That's all we have a right to spend. We do not have a right to go to our neighbors and demand more of their money. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John for 28, Doggett O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I rise today in support of this bill and ask for your support for that. I'm very appreciative of the positive aspects of the bill that I think just about everyone in this body supports: the exemption on Social Security income and military pensions and the expansion of the other exemption. I think we can't deny that the broadening of the base aspect of this is certainly, in the aggregate, going to increase taxes. Many of us, and I say us, myself included, have serious concerns about raising additional tax revenue. And I think it's worth mentioning that maybe a little historical perspective on the sales and services and use tax. This tax was imposed originally in the 1930s, has been revised up, it's been revised down. Different things have been included in the tax and subject to it. Some things have been in, some things have been out. But it's worth noting that as written, this sales and service and use tax was intended to apply to all sales and service and use tax. Some states go about their sales tax by specifically saying some things are taxable, and then if you want to add to it, you have to add additional things to put them in the regime to be taxed. West Virginia's law is a little different. It says all things are subject to this unless something is specifically exempted. And over time, previous legislatures have chosen to exempt certain things. I mean, right now, there are a number of big exemptions that most of us probably would agree with. I think the largest exemption is what we would call healthcare related things, hospitals, doctors, dentists. Around $750 million in tax revenue would be coming into general revenue if those were not exempted. Utilities is another $200 to $300 million that's exempted. There's professional services. You put all those together, that's another $200 to $300 million. If all the things that were subject to the sales and services and use tax were actually taxed, you could get this same amount of revenue at a rate that's 2% to 3%. But because legislatures in the past have chosen to exempt certain things, we have a 6% rate right now to get what we're getting. And the last time that this particular tax idea was revisited in a major way was in 1987. And I think it's worth noting that in 1987, there were 21 exemptions to the sales and services and use tax. These are approximate numbers, but today, or at least at the last time of the paper, the research paper that I looked up, the number of exemptions had increased from 21 to 64. Now, there may be more than that now. But over time, different organizations have lobbied successfully to get certain types of economic activities exempted from the sales and use tax. And so what we're proposing today in this bill is simply that some activities that have gained an exemption be put back in the bill, that exemption be removed. And I think that that's a fair and reasonable thing to do. We're all going to maybe have disagreements on the things that we think should be subject and the things that we think should not be subject, and what deserves an exemption, what doesn't. But ladies and gentlemen, I would submit to you that removing exemptions on things on the service and use tax is fair, and I just think that by doing that, when you broaden the base of what pays this tax, it makes it more fair on everyone, and I encourage support for the bill. Thank you.
John from the 17th, Target Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Few of you may recall, near the end of members' comments, I got up and read a definition out of the dictionary. Statesman. I've seen some statesmen and state ladies step up in this chamber in this last week, and I'm going to rise in strong support of this because statesmen have worked in the Finance Committee, in our leadership teams of both sides of this party, or both sides of this House, and they've come up with a very good bill here. Now, to quote one of my friends from the Eastern Panhandle, let's don't let perfect be the enemy of good. It's not perfect. Are we going to be back here? Probably. But there's some statesmen have put together a good direction for some things that probably have needed done for a long time in this state. So don't let perfect be the enemy of good. There's a lot of good here, and I'm going to urge everybody in this chamber to adopt this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further members desiring to speak before I recognize the gentleman from the 35th to close. Gentleman from 36, Doggett Row.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to say, first of all, there are two things at work here. There's the policy that we've been talking about, but there's also the process. You know, this came through a committee process, and I think that it's a success for us generally in the legislature. I think that it's the appropriate way for us to deal with policy. In our committee and finance, we were able to make changes to the bill, hone the bill, and come up with a better product and a better policy. I think it is stark, as was pointed out by other members of this body, it's stark difference between the tax policy changes that are being made by this body versus the tax policy changes proposed by the state Senate. It is remarkable. This body's taking care of the citizens who make less than $100,000, and the state Senate is taking care of folks who make more than $100,000. It's a very stark, clear difference, and for that I support this bill. It does not assure me that we're going to come out of this budget crisis unscathed. I am still very concerned about horrible cuts, that if this is the bill, I've argued that we should have a simple, fair, and final solution. And if this were the final solution, we would be looking at horrible cuts in higher education, a $50 million cut in the healthcare system that would translate with loss of federal dollars into $150 million. Incredible changes in higher education. The average debt of a student in community college in West Virginia is $15,000. We cannot continue to tax, in effect, tax the backs of students with higher and higher tuition. We've got to step forward with enough funds to be able to prevent those terrible, terrible cuts. There's 64,000 college students in West Virginia, and that's about 3 or 4% of the population. I'm not good with the math. But when you think about the 3 or 4 people who work to help them get through school, you're talking about 17 to 20% of the population are directly affected by cuts in higher education. And you say, well, how do we take care of that? Well, we obviously at some point we're going to have to grip a tax increase, a revenue increase from some source that's going to be able to protect us against those kinds of cuts. Higher education, public education. I mean, if this is all we're coming up with, please understand, those of you who are new this year, you may not you may not know what we went through last year for a tobacco tax increase, and the amount of funds that this bill's producing is about the same or less. Now, what that means is that if some other revenue source doesn't come into this process, and I hope that it does, if it doesn't, we will be back here next year in an election year arguing over taxes just like we had to do last year with the tobacco tax. This is something that's not going to go away. We've got to grip the reality that we need enough funding to prevent these horrible cuts. This bill is a good first step. I appreciate being able to participate in the bipartisan nature of it. I think we're off to a good start. And I have to say that I agree with my friend from Pendleton County that there's a great deal of pride that we can take in the kind of folks that we're protecting in our tax policy as opposed to the tax policy that we've seen coming over several times. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate it. I do support the bill. It's not enough, but it's certainly a good start.
John for 35th, Delegate Nelson to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage of this so that we can get on to our road bills and, most importantly, the budget.
Question for the House is the passage of the bill. Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine.
The following delegates have paired in accordance with House Rule 43. Delegate Canestraro, yea. Delegate Wilson, nay.
Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 74 ayes, 17 nays, 9 members absent, not voting. Majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk, please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 107 relating generally to the Tax Reform Act of 2017.
Are there amendments to the title?
Delegate Nelson moves to amend the title.
Question for the House is the adoption of the title amendment. All in favor of adoption will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the title amendment adopted. Gentleman from the 58th.
Mr. Speaker, I move the bill made effective from passage.
Gentleman from the 58th moves the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor of the gentleman's motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. Clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 87 ayes, 3 nays, 10 members absent not voting. 2/3 of the members elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk, please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Leaves of absence. Gentleman from the 58th.
Yes,
thank you. Excuse me, bill's on first reading. Leaves of absence.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleagues, Delegates Bates, Canestraro, Caputo, Ellington, Evans, Folk, N. Foster, Hornbuckle, Miley, and Moore.
Without objection, leaves will be granted. Remarks by members of the House. Lady from the 18th, Delegate Sabonia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know we want to get out of here. We've been here for 8 days or more, and but I wanted to basically take this time to speak to the governor. I was prepared to vote for that bill today. You know, I felt like it was reasonable to remove some exemptions, something that this has not been changed since 1987, and there were 21 exemptions back then, and now we have 64. But I voted against that bill because I am offended that this governor has not produced a budget. This was a special session on the budget, and I have to commend the House Finance Committee. I did not support what the Senate put over here. And what the Finance Committee, in a bipartisan manner, put together, I thought that was really good work, and I really, really wanted to vote for that. You know, I was a sponsor of a bill that would eliminate the tax on Social Security, and it pained me to vote no. But we are here for a special session for the budget. We have maybe 42 days before the fiscal year ends, and we need a budget. I have long advocated we do need comprehensive tax reform. And I think it's something that we need to do during the interims, come together with the House, the Senate, and have a tax reform plan that makes sense. We can't just keep throwing spitballs at the chalkboard and hope something sticks. I did want to vote for that bill, and I think it was a much better bill, but I am urging, and I'll look in the camera to the governor, where's the budget? Where's the budget? This is a special session on the budget, and the people in West Virginia are depending on this body and you to pass a budget. Where's the budget? Thank you.
Gentleman from 28, Doug Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A few days ago, we were entertained with the idea of alligators and making sausage. Today, we have proved that we may not be able to make sausage exactly, but I think we proved we made some good legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from 36, Doug Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentlelady yield?
Lady from the 18th, yield. Lady yields.
So you voted against that for strictly you don't want to see more political ploys or anything, but you voted against that just as your personal spitball at the chalkboard?
No, what I'm saying is we're here for a special session on the budget.
Okay, and we passed the revenue bill, but you voted against it because the governor wants to play political games. But so that was your
This is
political
a
game back to the governor?
backwards approach. I'm not going to argue with you.
One person at a time, please
Okay,
talk.
I'm yielding for your question, and I'm going to answer the question. Do you want me to answer the question?
You were against political ploys, so you voted against that as a special political message back to the governor.
sat here.
So that's your spitball
Can
back
I
to the governor.
answer your question? I'm not saying that
That's
these are
my
spitballs.
question. Is that your spitball back
I'm
to the
not saying
governor?
these are spitballs.
You don't
I've
want
lo-
political ploys.
Can
but
I
you
answer
voted
your
against
question?
it.
Okay, excuse me. We're not going to argue here. If the gentleman has a question, ask the question, and then the lady can answer.
My question is, you're against political ploys, but you just stood up as a message to the governor to vote against a bill that you agree with. Is that not a political ploy?
I sat here this morning and I was back and forth, going back and forth, wanting to vote for something like this. And I could not bring myself to vote until we have a budget because we need to know how this is going to be spent. We can't just do a blank check and expect him to, we don't know how he's going to spend the money because he hasn't given us a budget.
I understand. You don't want to answer the questions. Political ploys, political games.
I answered your question. I'm just
Lady
heartsick
did
we don't
answer
have a
the question.
budget.
Gentleman from the 46, Doug Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask unanimous consent that the gentleman from the 25th remarks relating to the coal miner in Wyoming County be placed in the appendix of the journal.
Without objection, remarks be placed in the appendix of the journal. Gentleman from the 20th, Doug Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to serve in this House and to fight for the people of West Virginia and to do the right thing. But to play the political game saying there's no budget, I've not seen one budget introduced by any member of the House. And what I want the people to remember, this session that we're called into, the Speaker, the Majority Leader, anyone can introduce bills themselves. We don't have to wait on the governor to introduce all the bills. I'm proud to stand here. Yeah, our delegate Coles, we can introduce bills ourselves. We can introduce them. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Lady from the 51st, Doug Fritsch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the governor changed the call and added the budget to the call? I don't believe so. I don't believe we can introduce a budget bill, because it's not on the call. This isn't even a budget call. The people seem to think we're down here working on a budget, but it's not even on the governor's call. Thank you.
Further remarks by members. Miscellaneous business. Gentleman from the 58th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Subject to announcements, I move the House adjourn until Tuesday at 4 p.m.
Other announcements. Gentleman from 33rd, Doug Henshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a meeting scheduled upstairs this morning at 10 a.m. for the Judiciary Work Group on Adoption and Foster Care. We had competing commitments at that time, and that meeting did not get held. But if you had planned to attend that meeting or have an interest in receiving the materials that will go along with that work group, I'd ask you to please print your name on this pad, which I'll leave at my desk. We'll begin to circulate materials related to the work of that committee before we convene again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further announcements. Not request for the House is a motion by the gentleman from the 58th that the House stand adjourned until 4 p.m. on Tuesday. All in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the House adjourned until 4 p.m. on Tuesday.